Hey everybody, and welcome to Emotional Runway, an entrepreneur's guide to mental health. Today is our very first episode, and I wanted to introduce you to, well, me, and tell you a little bit about what drove me to start this podcast, as well as introduce you to our fabulous co-host, Krista Moulton. We'll talk about what Emotional Runway means, some of the great guests we're going to have on in the coming weeks, and most of all, let you know that if you are running a business, even a successful one, and you're struggling, you are not alone. So here we go, episode 1. I hope you enjoy. Kind of give you a little bit of background on why I decided to start this podcast. I am a founder, an entrepreneur myself. I founded a business called Skyfire Consulting in 2014, and we focus primarily on public safety drone programs and helping fire and police departments get started with drones. But in the course of the last 8 years of running this business, we've had a few major incidents, one of which being the COVID-19 pandemic. We are now heading longwise into a recession. And, it's been a real challenge from a financial standpoint. Everybody talks about the idea of fiscal runway and financial runway. How much money do you have left and how much, how long can the company survive? And nobody ever talks about the idea of emotional runway. So you may have money to go for another 6 months, but you may not have the stamina or the mental fortitude to continue doing that. And I think that's actually probably more important than the money. So I went through this myself over the last several months, just struggling. Is this all worth it? You're leveraging every penny I've ever made, my whole life savings, putting my family through this, really just asking myself the question, is this all worth it? And I heard somebody one time say, entrepreneurs are the only group of people that'll work 100 hours a week, so they don't have to work 40 hours a week. That is so true. And it's like every waking moment I'm thinking about, the business and what's working and what's not working. Do I have enough people or too many people or, where is all the money coming from? And, just the struggles week to week. And so, I started looking for resources in mental health for entrepreneurs, and they're really just not out there. So I decided I was going to do something about that. So really excited to have Krista Moulton joining me as my co-host in this journey. So hello.
Hello, everybody.
And thank you so much for doing this. We only met just a few weeks ago and just kind of sharing our ideas, for you to sit and sort of listen to what it's like to be a founder, and you are actually a founder yourself as well.
Yes.
We'll get into that here in just a moment. But if you would just tell everybody, introduce yourself to, kind of tell us about your background and why this topic was of interest to you.
So thank you for having me, Matt. I'm really excited to do this. So I am a licensed mental health professional, specifically a licensed clinical social worker. I have a background in psychology. I graduated from Columbia University. I've been spending about 2 decades so far in mental health, doing counseling, coaching, and consulting. My practice is primarily focused on entrepreneurs, neurodiverse, and women. I became really interested in entrepreneurial mental health about 2 years ago. I had a handful of referrals of entrepreneurs and my own personal experience about starting up my business and another business in the community. And specifically, why would someone ever want to do something like this that's chronic stress? You just worry all the time. It feels like it's always on your shoulders. So I started looking into the research and clinical information to kind of guide my practice and work with entrepreneurs, and found there was really not a whole lot out there. So Matt and I connected, I guess, a couple weeks ago and talked about how relevant this is to really start the conversation and kind of raise awareness and see if we can, at minimum, let people know out there that there is help. And this is a really normal experience to go through the highs and lows of the entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah, it is remarkable how little information there is out there. And I know because I went and looked for it myself. Why do you think that is? I have some thoughts on it, but I'm curious why, in your experience.
I think in my experience, that answer largely is the fact that the mask or facade entrepreneurs put on, that is, we are capable of everything and anything. And one of the things I see a lot of is we do not want to show that we're vulnerable, right? And sometimes asking for help is a sign of weakness, right? And this talks a lot about the stigma of what we're facing and why entrepreneurs particularly are not stepping up to ask for help. But inside, it's a struggle.
Well, and I think that seems to me it's a symptom of a larger problem in our society, which is we all put on a mask, we all go on social media and talk about how great our lives are. And, obviously we're all struggling with something. Whether it's mental health or something else too. But I also think from my perspective too, I mean, you are so personally invested. Your identity is so wrapped up in what you're doing as a business owner that it feels like a personal failure to go on and be like, actually, you know what, this is really hard. And then you also have the added complication of, you're trying to get, I was just reading a statistic this morning, the average investor, venture capital investor spends 2.5 minutes looking at a pitch deck. And so in 2.5 minutes, you have to convince somebody that you're worth writing like a multi-million-dollar check to, or at least having a second conversation with. And if there's any information out there about you on the internet where you're like, hey, I'm struggling, this is hard, it's like, oh, well, this guy can't handle that responsibility. And like, that's just not the case. And one of the things when I wrote a few posts, and we can share that with the podcast. So the initial post that I wrote, a lot of the responses that I got were, well, I never really wanted to put myself out there because people might think I'm weak, or, people might think I can't handle it or can't hack it. Me personally, I'd rather put my money behind somebody who has risked it all and is so passionate about their dream that they're willing to step out of the corporate life and go out there and be a founder. And so that actually I'd much rather have somebody who was honest about that, me personally. I don't know how investors feel about that. We're going to find out because we're going to have a couple of them on this podcast, and we're going to ask them that question. But is this a symptom of our society in general that we have to kind of put this mask on and be what we're not on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the entrepreneurs I've met, largely this population is made up of males. And there's this term out there called toxic masculinity, where, you have to appear stoic and strong and nothing ever affects you and you're non-emotional and you're just kind of like on it all the time. And that is not reality. Our humanness, we all have mental health, we all have mental illness. It's really just kind of a spectrum. It really depends on what we're going through and how significantly we're impacted by those circumstances. I think for entrepreneurial experience, we operate at a higher level of stress, chronic level of stress every single day.
Well, because it all falls on us, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think that's actually one of the biggest things that I identified in exploring my own emotions, talking to you and talking to others. Mm-hmm. Actually, a lot of it is loneliness. It's not even so much like I'm scared about what's going to happen, but like if this goes to shit, it's all on me, right? Because I'm the founder. Absolutely. It's my vision. It's my idea. It was my initial money. And if it goes bad, then Matt sucks. You're like, no, like there's a global pandemic. Like this hasn't happened in any of our lifetimes, right? Some of this stuff is out of our control.
Yeah. And so speaking about the loneliness in mental health, we know that loneliness is also related to increased risk of suicide. It's related to depression, so these are things commonly experienced by entrepreneurs. So Dr. Michael Freeman, I think mentioned him in our previous conversations. He is one of the researchers on entrepreneurial mental health, one of the first people that started to look into these issues. And an article he put out said like 72% of entrepreneurs will indirectly or directly be affected by mental health issues, and that's compared to 48% of non-entrepreneurs. So there's some significant research out there that says we need to pay attention to this, and we need to know what to do about it and know that it's okay to speak up.
Well, there's a stigma about mental health in the general community too, right? So it's just that magnified, I think is kind of the, but if you think about, so those statistics you gave, so 1 in 2 people has some sort of issue with mental health. 3 out of 4 entrepreneurs, literally, if you're listening to this podcast, look around. And everybody around you is
check in with the person next to you because chances are they're dealing with something.
Yeah, and they're not talking about it because, if you think about how many entrepreneurs, there must be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of entrepreneurs around the country, around the world, and there's very little information about mental health. So if 3 out of 4 of them are suffering with something, how little information there is out there, that means literally nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Which is exciting that we can pave some new ground here and kind of talk about that. So, it's pretty exciting. I want to take a minute and tell everybody. So we are actually recording this podcast at the I2C facility at the University of Alabama, Huntsville. Invention to Innovation is what the I2C stands for. What's cool about this facility, it's an incubator, where startups can come and they can rent office space and they have access to mentors and great resources here at the university, including this podcast studio. But when I posted these initial things on LinkedIn and just talking about what I was struggling with, Rigvet Joshi, who is the director of this facility, immediately texted me and said, we can do something about this at our facility. So there's 25 entrepreneurs in this building. and you were working with him to help bring some mental health resources here for those 25 people. Let's talk about that for a minute.
So in conversation with Rigvid and just the post that you made, it was clear that there needed to be some more attention to the mental health needs of entrepreneurs. He was very interested in trying to figure out, like, how do we do that? What type of program do we build out? How do we best support entrepreneurs? So we're in the beginning phases of building out a program called MindSpark, and it will be focused on providing whatever the needs are of our entrepreneurs here. I think two main needs are building a community, a sense of community. So figuring out a way to kind of connect with one another and get support from one another, but also just really understanding, like, kind of a baseline of what these entrepreneurs are bringing to the table, what are the challenges you're going through, what are the things we can do, the skills, the tools we can equip you with in order to endure those challenges, and really kind of take this journey with a better sense of ease, possibly, if that's...
I can speak as an I2C entrepreneur, and we have a bigger office in Atlanta, but I'm the only one here in Huntsville, so I'm by myself, and I have a tiny little office upstairs just to get me out of the house. When I first got my office here, it was like at the height of the pandemic, and so nobody was here. Everybody had facilities here, but we didn't do mixers. I still, to this day, I mean, we've met a couple of them together, but I really don't know any of the founders that are in my own building, even in the offices next to me. Yeah. So that sense of community, I think, is going to be huge, and just making those resources. We talked about even just something as simple as starting a Slack channel between the groups that are in this building. But I'm excited about that. I'm excited that Rigvid is excited and that you guys are working together. My part of this is, doing this podcast and helping to bring some outside voices into this. So, the types of people that we're going to be talking to on this podcast, it's you and me against the world. We're going to bring them all in. We talk about it from the founder's perspective. You can talk about it from the mental health perspective. And, I really am interested in talking to other founders, obviously, other people who have started companies, but also talking to some venture capitalists and understanding, like, is this a stigma that they're paying attention to? I mean, honestly, in their best interest to make sure that their founders and their entrepreneurs are mentally healthy if they want to make money. So we're going to talk to them. I also want to talk to some other mental health experts, particularly experts in fields like mindfulness and meditation and Eastern practices and things like that, which I think is super exciting. One of the things, we all bring our past into our current positions. I was actually a medical news producer at CNN for about 10 years before I started this company. I have some very interesting friends and very interesting places that I've had the pleasure of interviewing over the last 20 years. And so we're going to be hopefully leveraging a bunch of them. One of those actually, so when I worked at CNN, I worked with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who was our chief medical correspondent there, continues to be at CNN. His brother is a founder, Sunil Gupta, and Sunil wrote an amazing book called Backable. And so I have to give credit where credit's due. The term Emotional Runway actually came from that book. I did check with Sunil ahead of time before I stole it. And he's like, it's not mine, you can use it. But I have talked to Sunil, and he's going to join us on the podcast. What's super great about his book, just to give him a little plug now, is the book actually talks about what makes you backable as a founder. And it's not necessarily how great your pitch deck is or even how great your idea is, but just what makes you somebody that an investor wants to support. And, mental health is a huge part of that because, as he talks about in the book, and as I think we all know just intuitively, like when you walk into a room, if you're spent, if you have no emotional runway left, like it shows. So, I'm in the middle of fundraising right now, and I've got to put on a happy face and get out there and be like, everything's awesome. And it is. I mean, we're in a great industry. Drones is, an industry that's growing like crazy, and there's really cool stuff going on. But I'm exhausted. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's tough. Yeah. And, 2 years of pandemic. And right now, investors are running for the hills because of this, the recession. And we got a, potential world war looming over in Eastern Europe. And, just to add insult to injury. So, I'm excited to have Sunil join us and kind of talk about what he's seen. What's cool about his book is that he's gone out and interviewed hundreds of founders and entrepreneurs. Wow. He's gone out and talked to hundreds of venture capitalists and tried to figure out what the secret sauce is. So very excited that we're going to have him. I have another friend, Dr. Charles Raison, who was at Emory University when I first met him. He's responsible for introducing me to the Dalai Lama, which was one of the most incredible experiences of my lifetime.
Life-changing.
Unbelievable. And so we'll talk to Dr. Raison about that. But the reason he was working with the Dalai Lama was because He was focused very specifically on mindfulness meditation and that practice. He's also working on all kinds of interesting things like psychedelics and mental health, and he's just a fascinating guy to talk to. So looking forward to having him on the show. And then I've got a friend of mine, Valerie Shen, who was she was in venture capital, then she went back to business school. Now she's back in venture capital. When I invited her to join us, I told her that she made VC less scary. So we're going to start with her, and then maybe we'll get some of the scary folks on too. But I'm really excited to kind of open this issue up. And, I obviously you can't name names and talk specifics, but in the founders that you've dealt with, I mean, do you feel like, is there a predominant mental health issue? Is it loneliness, anxiety, depression, all of the above?
I would say the common thread in entrepreneurs is definitely the excessive worry, the anxiety. The loneliness is definitely something that is common, I think more so in earlier stages when you don't have the opportunity yet to have gathered your team of support. But definitely the worry. I mean, the worry's always there.
Yeah, the loneliness is probably a symptom of all the other stuff too. So.
Yeah. A lot of perfectionist tendencies, right? It's all on me. I have to make sure this works, endless hours. I mean, I hear a lot of sleepless nights, because of the pressure of what do I have to put out there tomorrow?
3 a.m. wake-up calls for me. That's it. Like when I will regularly wake up at 3 a.m. and cannot go back to sleep because I'm like, tomorrow's Monday, or tomorrow, well, frankly, Tuesday or Wednesday, or because we're working 7 days a week. I have found that we all love the weekends, right? So even when I worked in corporate America, we all love the weekends. But for me, it was the weekends are the one time where I can't get emails from creditors. My team doesn't bother me. People just kind of shut off Friday at 3:00, which is, it's just I'm not worried about what's coming up on my phone. And frankly, whether or not you keep your phone on at night and on the weekends, that's a whole other topic I'm sure we will attack at some point, but a constant reminder.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. It's how do we slow down? You've been at this 10 years.
Almost, yeah.
So you've had some practice, right? But not, people who are just starting this, that's a whole different ballgame, right?
Yeah, and I think too, like you said, I've had practice doing it, but I've also had practice with the rejection of it because I think, sometimes when we're in corporate jobs, rejection is okay, well, they didn't like the paper that I wrote, or they didn't like the story I did last week or whatever. But when somebody rejects your business, they're rejecting you, right? Because it was your idea. And so there's a lot of that wrapped up in it too, which I find really interesting. Is that common, do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think going back to what you said, it's your identity. This is it, and this is how you're providing for your family. There's pretty high stakes, and the fear of failure is ever present.
This is like a therapy session for me. This is awesome. Now everybody knows why I want to do this podcast. But, one of the things that keeps coming up for me too, and I'm sharing this because I think it'll be useful for other people, not for me to get the answer, although it'll be helpful. Everybody messages me all the time. Oh, it's so great what you're doing. look at you. You guys are rocking it. And it's I don't want to let those people down and be yeah, you actually have no idea what a day-to-day, what the day-to-day is like. And we're doing a great job making it look like we're doing a great job. And that's my job, right? But, and I hate that. I'm an authentic person. I want, I don't sugarcoat it, it's been hard the last couple of years. We're making do, we're coming out of it. I have a great team and all that. But, on a day-to-day basis, not every day is amazing. And we're not killing it and saving the world every day. And so it's hard to kind of get that across.
Yeah. And I think one thing that struck me about you when I met you is your ability to really be authentic and really speak up, which I think this is part of what we're talking about. Not a lot of people feel comfortable doing that. So where do you think that came from for you?
Yeah, I can't fake it. I'm not one of those people who can just be and actually I'll tell you this quick story. So I was at a conference 3 or 4 months ago. I don't know, maybe longer. It all blends together at this point. It was when I was kind of at the height of struggling. And at these conferences, any industry conference, right? You go and you're everything's awesome. We're all drinking. Things are great. Things are happening. We're moving and shaking. And I was I am so full of shit. I can't even stand myself right now. I literally left the conference. I left. Because I was I can't do this for 2 more days. This is exhausting for me to kind of fake it. And I don't know where that comes from. I think, I come from a family where we just talk about everything, probably to a fault. because we're constantly arguing. But, I can't keep it in. It's if something's on my mind, I got to talk about it. Maybe it's the journalist in me, or maybe that's why I became a journalist. I don't really know, but I just can't, probably to my own detriment, I can't not talk about stuff that's going on. And so it's been really hard for me to, sort of make it seem all sunshine and roses. But I also think that that's unrealistic, right? I mean, every investor knows that you have tough times, and, there's no hiding from your financials. So when they look at them, they're going to say, like, yeah, I can tell the last 2 years have been tough, but we're here, we've survived and all that. And so I don't know, I just got to this point where I was like, I can't, go on LinkedIn and only post about good stuff anymore. We all go on LinkedIn. It's almost worse than Facebook, honestly, because it's Facebook for business. And so it's total bullshit. We're going on there and being like, look at this great new customer I got, and look at this great new feature, and look at this great new thing. But we don't ever talk about, hey, I haven't slept in the last 7 days to get that new feature out. Or I put it out there and there was a bug and we had to pull it back. Or, in our case, when we started testing our drones and they started falling out of the sky, we don't post about that stuff. Nobody ever talks about that. But when I started talking to your point about peer-to-peer networking, and I started talking to some industry colleagues in the drone industry who have built drones from scratch and have started testing them, and they're like, oh yeah, we actually put them on a string so that when they do fall out of the sky, they can't actually hit the ground. They just rest on the string. Had I had that conversation ahead of time, we probably would have saved a ton of money on parts. But, I think that's just it, is like when I put that out there, the sheer number of people that messaged me and said, me too. I'm having that same issue. I've had that same concern. Yeah, every dollar that I've ever saved is now in this business. And that's scary. And, it was cool to hear from all those people. You and Rigved got to see all the posts that were public, but it was the private messages that I got from people who I was like, oh, you seem like you have it all together. And actually, it turns out you don't, just like everybody else. And that's okay. And I think that's the point of this, is to normalize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, mental health, the one thing I talk a lot to my clients about, and I believe strongly about this, you had mentioned Eastern practices and mindfulness. That is a lot of the work I do in my office. I do think when we talk about mental health, entrepreneur or non-entrepreneur, it's just mind, body, and spirit. We're really trying to capture this holistic way of healing that is really important for me. And it sounds like, again, I think you kind of embrace that also. So that's really helpful for me to hear.
Whatever helps, I'm in.
Yeah.
If I have to do, I'm a big guy. So like doing yoga is not going to be easy for me, but I'm in. Like I want to do it. One of the things that's helped me is exercise. Actually, the only thing that's helped me is exercise. So, I'm a bigger guy and I haven't always been great at exercising. But I just started getting out and walking, and I couldn't. Today I was like trying to get some thoughts down on paper, and I couldn't think. So I went out and walked around campus here for an hour, and it really cleared my head. And now that I've been doing it regularly, we went on vacation last week for fall break, and I didn't do it, and I was like, I feel awful. Like I have to go out, and it's not even for fitness anymore. It's just for mental health. So I think just little things like that will be really helpful. Just to talk about.
And one of our other founders, when we were having that conversation, he brought up the fact that, in entrepreneurial space, we talk a lot about exercise, but what he found, right, is that exercising the mind, really the mindset is the most critical. Like that's what he particularly has to focus on. And that is true, and it's when you feel pressed for time and you've got so much going on, like how do you create like that secret combination of, mind, body, and actually still doing your work and maybe also taking care of your family. There's so much responsibility, but
you sleep even less is the answer, right? So I get up at 6 a.m. now and I hate it, but I get, my kids occasionally will be up early enough and they'll be like, can we come on your walk? And I was like, no, you can't. I just need to be alone, or like I listened to Sunil's book, on audiobooks. Then I got really inspired and it really helped me kind of shape my next fundraising pitch and all that kind of stuff, which is awesome. But then I was like, okay, it's enough business self-help for a minute. Let me just listen to a funny book, So Tom Segura, I don't know if you're familiar, he's one of my favorite comedians, listening to his podcast and his audiobook now. So now it's just fun to listen to. I'm not trying to learn something. And then I'll probably go back to a business book. Yeah, no, I think that's been just having that time alone to clear my head, not think about work. I don't look at my phone. I have to take my phone, unfortunately, because I'm tracking my distance and all that, but I don't look at it. So, well, this has been great. I think, I'm really excited about what's to come. We're going to do these hopefully weekly is the goal. We didn't talk about that. You sound like I just gave you that news.
I think you just literally gave me that
great.
news.
All right. Well, we're going to do these weekly.
I'm in.
No, I'm excited about it. And get some cool guests in here and kind of really bring some light to this issue and get it out there. So this has been our first episode of Emotional Runway. I'm glad to be on this journey with you. I should add too that the logo has a runway in there because I'm a pilot and I couldn't not. I'm an aviation geek, so I had to kind of get that in there. But we can talk about airplanes too if you want. Mostly we'll just stick to business probably. So thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully you will like, subscribe, and share with all of your entrepreneur friends or anybody who's interested in becoming an entrepreneur. So we don't want to ruin it for you, but it's hard. I don't think we're sugarcoating it. So thanks so much, and we will talk to you next time. I hope you got something out of that. I hope you felt heard. It was more like a therapy session for me than work, I'll be honest. But we'll be back again soon with another episode. So thank you for listening. Please tell your friends, share it with your networks. This kind of resource needs to exist for us founders. And this is just one way we're going to do it. Like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time.